Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Barry Beckham. You know the drill. If you're watching on YouTube, please consider subscribing to my channel. Hit that notification bell and you'll be informed whenever I post a new video. Now, I've been around Photoshop for quite a long time, but it still has the ability to surprise and sometimes impress me. The latest has been auto masking in Adobe Camera Raw. Here's an image where the appeal is the low evening backlight that's illuminating the beaks of the pelicans. It doesn't hurt that one of them also has their beak open. The backlight has been mostly positive here, but the water does look just a little muddy. Now, given the warm colours of the pelicans' beaks, it would be nice if the water was a little more blue, because a combination of strong warm colours and a cool colour like blue can be quite appealing. Now, maybe one way we could achieve that with a bold subject like this is via masking in Adobe Camera Raw. So here we are. Usual first start is with chromatic aberration and lens corrections, then some general adjustments, but this image doesn't need a great deal. So let's start with our optics, and I'll tick the box to remove chromatic aberration. I did have a good look around this image with it greatly enlarged, but this is one of the few images where I actually couldn't find much evidence of chromatic aberration, no doubt due to the style or type of lighting I had that particular evening. But I will tick to use the profile corrections and you'll see that little pop. I'm going to move directly to the basic tab next, because I think the colour balance of the image is pretty good. I don't think it's going to need a great deal of work. Looking up at my histogram, maybe I could squeeze a little bit of exposure into it, but not very much at all. I'm looking down at maybe bringing down the highlights so it kills a little bit of the rim lighting, so these are going to be very minor tweaks, a little bit of clarity, maybe a tiny amount of vibrance to bring those beaks up, but to be honest, I think that's about all this image needs. But as I said in my intro, it would be nice if we could make that blue water a little bit more blue than it currently is. Well, maybe we could turn to masking to be able to do that. So let me close down my basic tab here and we'll select the adjustment brush up on the right hand side. I'm going to just click into the picture surface and we'll get the pin appear. I'm going to tick the mask options and you can see we can change the colour of the mask. I like a nice strong colour, as you can see here. But I'm also going to tick the auto mask. Now, looking at my brush, you can see the feather is quite a long way up. I don't think the feather of the brush I'm about to use is critical to what we're going to do here. You can see the flow is very high. And if I use my square bracket keys, you can see I can adjust the size of the brush. These are the square keys to the right of the letter P. So what I'm going to do here is use my brush to mask around the edge, but as you can see, the brush is set to automatic. So Camera Raw is doing all of the hard work for us. Don't worry too much if you go over the edge a little bit. We can remove it a little bit later. Let's go around the top and I'll go all the way around this so you can see this more or less in real time. Down into that little V there and around up here, around the back, up into that area. Now, I went over a little bit there. You've got two choices. You can remove it later, but I could hit Control Z and just undo my last operation, and maybe next time when I get to there I'll stop, then I'll start again. So I'm actually doing it in smaller stages, and as you can see, when you slow down and take your time, it's pretty good. Now, when I get to the bottom of the bird, what I thought I would do was push my feather up, make my brush big, and I'll make use of the feather of the brush by just brushing around there. So any changes I make should be quite soft there. Now all I've got to do is to spend a bit of time just flooding in the mask around the outer edge, and that's going to be pretty quick and pretty easy. So I'm going to carry on and do that, and I'll be back when it's complete. Now that didn't take any time at all, but I'm just looking around the edge of my pelicans very critically. I can see a little bit of evidence of maybe a lack of mask down here, and maybe just on the head of the second pelican. So if I just zoom in a little bit and I go to the eraser part of the tool that I've just been using, as you can see I've got a very small brush. I can just erase any little areas where I may have been a little bit too quick and dirty with my work. And as you can see, I can adjust my mask in just a couple of seconds. It doesn't take any time at all. If you want to move around an enlarged image like this, just hold the space bar and click and drag. And it's worth just spending a little time. But I think what we've got to bear in mind here is we're going to be making the blue water more blue than it currently is. So it's going to hide a multitude of sins. So let's move over to the mask options, and I'm going to turn them off. Now, if I go to my temperature, I could just move down to the blue, and all I'm changing is my background water. I think we've got to be a bit careful we don't go too far with this. And we're all going to choose something different, but I want something fairly nice, something around there. At the moment, that suits me with the colours of the beak and the colour of the water. Done quickly and easily with the auto mask. Now, wouldn't it be quite a good idea to open this up as a smart object into Photoshop, and then to save the image as a Photoshop file? The benefits of that is we can live with this image for a little while, maybe walk away and come back. But if we come to this image tomorrow and we suddenly decide that maybe I'd like my water a little more blue or a little less blue, then because we're working with smart objects, I can double click my thumbnail. I can open this up back into Adobe Camera Raw exactly where I left off. If I go back to my brush and I click to bring the pin back into life, I've still got the opportunity to tweak that colour down just a little bit if that's what I'd like to do. Knowing that I've also got it saved in Photoshop somewhere, so even now I'm not burning my boats. What else would I do with this image? It's a little bit weak right at the top, maybe a little bit of shading up there, either with an adjustment brush, maybe with a gradient. Now I think the gradient filter would be the most logical to do that top part, so let's select it from the right hand side. I'm going to click and drag down. I'm just coming over the bird's head because we should get a nice gradient in the middle. I may be able to come down a little further. I think all I'd like to do, let's have a look at tweaking down a little bit of the exposure there. I don't want to go too far. That's made it a little bit dull compared to the rest, so maybe a little touch of saturation. Maybe that's a bit too much. Let's come back up a bit. It's quite delicate, I think, the amount of change we need there. We don't need too much at all. I think that's going to work pretty well. And I suppose the other thing you could consider is the circular filter. I do use that quite a bit. So let's take a look at that by selecting that, and I'll double click and the bounding box will appear. I'll touch the V key to hide it, and we'll just look at dropping down the exposure a little bit around the edge just to focus the attention on the pelicans. I think that's just about it. Let's click the OK button and open this up into Photoshop. Now, after living with my image for just a little while, I did take it back into Adobe Camera Raw, and I used an adjustment brush on the eyes of the two pelicans, and all I did was just lifted the exposure a touch and increased the saturation of the yellow part of the eye, just to make it compete a little bit stronger with the colour of the beak that's coming from that backlight. There's just a couple of little spots I'd like to fix. Now, we've got two choices here. We could rasterize the layer, no problem with that if we've got it saved, but we can go down to the bottom of the layers, add a new blank layer over the top of a smart object, and we can clone or use the healing brush on that. So if I select my healing brush here, just make sure you've got sample all layers from the top of the screen. There's only a couple of little marks here which are annoying me. There's a little bit of white in the water there, and a little highlight on the plumage of the second pelican. Maybe just one other little spot or two that I may want to touch. But other than that, it hasn't taken too long to create this image. Can I remind you that I do have a lot of my photography posted in galleries on Flickr. I'll include a link below. Flickr is great because you can always see the camera and the settings used for any photograph. I also run a photographic forum at the address you can currently see on screen, but I will link to that below too. Come along, sign up for free, meet me and others who share your passion. I'll see you next time.